Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and pleased to welcome in now senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, whose weekly segment is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. All right, we'll review it with you, Greg. Execution not airtight for the Bills in this game, and even though it was tight, they just quite simply did not execute on as many plays as the Chiefs did. When they come up 3 points short. I know there's a lot of talk out on social media and all these other places about officiating, but I think even the players knew they did not play an airtight football game, and it cost them.
I mean, I always struggle when games are that close. And you can certainly say, look, whenever you lose a game, players and coaches are always going to say that we didn't execute, to the best that we could execute. But boy, that game was close. I mean, they were obviously up 22-21. I've never been, when I played sports 100 years ago, I was never one to really comment on officiating, but that fourth down play was such a big play in the game. It's you could look at any number of plays in that game. I mean, one play that really stood out to me was when he had Samuel wide open on that shallow crosser, and there was really no one in front of him. And I forget at what point that was in the game. Something tells me first half, Brownie. Is that correct?
I'm not going to remember exactly. I haven't had the stomach. I haven't had the stomach to review the tape yet.
Yeah, you know the play I'm talking about. I just forget. Was it a great throw? No. Could it have been caught? Yes. A great throw, and he's able to turn up the field with no one there because they had busted the coverage, and it probably turns out to be a 25, 30-yard gain. So you can go through in a game that's that close. You can always start going through individual plays, and I know that coaches and players always, speak in generalities. Oh, we didn't execute well enough. But boy, that game was close. I mean, Steve, you played in a lot of those games. You can always say you don't execute well enough when you lose, but that's, to me, that's an easy thing to say.
We're right, and we knew it was going to be that way coming in. We've seen this 4 times before in these playoff games. The first AFC Championship game, the Chiefs won easily by 14, and then every one of them has just been by the skin of their teeth. Yeah, it's just been all the way through. It's been one of those games. What do you say? And we've been taking calls all week and talking about this all week. Certainly, the Chiefs are no easy team to defend, particularly in their own building. But this Bills defense just seems like to lack an elite player or two or three at levels of the defense that you really need them. And I think that's one of the things that people are looking for, maybe as a sign of change, that the Bills would reach out and grab an elite pass rusher or a big-time corner or maybe both.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, obviously I give this a lot of thought, with every team really, because that's what I do, but certainly with the Bills, because I do talk to you guys every week, and so I was thinking after that game, okay, I know what the narrative on social media is going to be. I never go with that kind of stuff. You would think, listening to social media on Monday, that the Bills need to get rid of Josh Allen, but you know how ridiculous that stuff is. But anyway, but I was thinking that when you really look at this defense, Steve, and I think you're 100% right. I think they have a lot of nice players, good players. I mean, Milano's a good player. Bernard's a good player. I think the secondary probably needs some upgrades. I think Rousseau had a nice year, but he wasn't a factor at all in that game. So I do agree with you. I think that when you really look at their defense, and this is the job now of Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and the entire scouting and coaching staff, to really look and see where they need to improve. But I think that you could say, and not be unfair about saying it, that they need some impact players on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, they definitely. And I would expect most of the offseason efforts to be addressing that side of the ball too. I'm kind of running some of these plays through my head from the game, because you referenced the Samuel play. There's also the
but
play.
You remember the play, right?
And there's also a play out by the sideline where he completes it to Cooper. There's traffic out there. He gets through the traffic with a block in front of him, and a defensive player for the Chiefs makes a shoestring tackle. I think it's Karlaftis. Otherwise, he's up the sideline for 25, 30 yards at least.
Wasn't that the play? That was on the final drive, was it not?
Yeah,
I believe
think it
that was on the
actually.
final drive, which
Yeah.
ended with
Otherwise,
the,
he's up the
obviously-
sideline for 25,
Yeah.
30 yards.
No. So I mean, that's my point is, so many you can go through individual plays in all these games when they're that close, and that's why I made the point that it's so easy after a game like that, because Steve, you played, so when you lose a game. First of all, players right after a game are not thinking about all that; they're just disappointed, and it's so easy to say we didn't execute well enough. That's easy. But look how close these games have been, and no knock on the Chiefs at all. We know that Mahomes is maybe on his way to being the greatest of all time, and we can talk about some of the things there. But I mean, you go back to last year when Tyler Bass, who's really been a great kicker for them, misses a field goal in the playoffs that would have tied it and sent the game to overtime. I mean, it's so they probably said the same thing after that game that they didn't execute well enough, but that's just so easy to say.
All right, so let's look at it this way. I know that the Chiefs are certainly getting an awful lot of credit for the scheming that they came up with for this game. What about Buffalo's scheming? I think they were limited defensively because after Benford goes out with an injury, and they're already playing with a rookie at safety and Bishop, I feel like they just worked very hard to cover up the back end, which left them vulnerable in the short to intermediate area, which left either Patrick Mahomes with a lot of green grass to run into or to throw into for most of the afternoon.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think what the Chiefs evolved into this season, and obviously you saw them twice, so you studied them and you know them. They were not really a big play offense this year. What they really morphed into was a third down conversion offense, and they did a really good job with that. I mean, I think in the third quarter, when they hit Brown for 15 yards out of the bunch, and it was versus man. Then they hit Worthy for 24 yards, I think, on the go-ahead field goal drive. For 24 yards, a same kind of concept where, they did a lot of the natural pick or natural rub elements. That's what they really evolved into. And then in the red zone, they were really good. I mean, look, the play we're just looking at, the Mahomes touchdown, was the exact same play as the Hunt touchdown that ended the first drive. The exact same play, except in the first quarter he gave it to Hunt, and right there he kept the ball. But it was, the inverted wishbone. It was the pulling lineman. They do a really good job with those kinds of things. And, that's the offense that they've kind of evolved into. I was amazed as I was doing my research, through the playoffs, that during the regular season, Xavier Worthy only had 4 receptions of 20 plus yards. I mean, if you had said that when they drafted him, you'd think, oh, that's nuts. The guy's, with Mahomes, he's going to have a ton of 20 plus yard, receptions. He had 4 all season long. They were not a big play offense by any stretch of the imagination.
So what do you about the Buffalo Bills? And they came out of the game, and a couple of guys said, they were running some concepts that we hadn't seen, but you go back and maybe other teams had run them against Buffalo, and like Baltimore maybe running a couple of read options that the Chiefs don't run very much because Mahomes that's not his thing. Did you see too much of that scheme-wise from the Chiefs doing stuff that other teams had done against the Bills in the run game?
Well, whenever I hear that, I always think that it's not stuff they say it that way, but I think what it is it's getting to a play from a different look. That's what I always see it as, more than, oh, I've never seen that concept before in my life. There's not 1,000 concepts, but like that touchdown we just saw with Mahomes, I don't recall seeing that particular play run from that formation. I'd seen them run that formation throughout the season. They did have both Gray and Kelsey in the backfield because they played a lot of 12 personnel. So that's something that we have seen, but I have not seen that particular play myself. I can't remember every play they ran all year, of course, but I don't remember seeing that particular play from that formation. And in fact, you could see on that play that Milano, who's a very good player, obviously, he saw the pulling guards and he got stuck inside, and they didn't really even need to block him. So it ended up being 2-on-2 on the outside with Gray and Kelsey blocking. Because my guess is they thought that Mahomes would get up on the safety. Well, it turned out because Milano got stuck inside that either Kelsey or Gray, I forget, was able to block the safety. So, I think it's just doing things from formations that you don't see that specific play from that formation or from that look.
Do you feel that you saw anything from the Bills that was different from anything they had run all season? The reason I ask that is you're in the playoffs. You're playing
Yep.
one of the best coaching staffs in football. Logic would say you have to have a few things in your bag that they have not seen to try to give your players an
Sure.
advantage. Did you witness any of that through the course of
Well,
this game?
I guess, Brownie, the way I'd answer that is this. I can't answer that, in a definitive, oh yeah, I didn't see this, but one thing I would say, and I think Joe Brady knows a hell of a lot more than I do, certainly about his team. But and I don't know if they felt this way because they look, obviously Josh was very risk averse this year, only 6 interceptions. The run game was pretty good throughout the season for the most part. This is the way they played. And they still scored, 30 some odd points a game, or right in that range. But I always felt watching them every week, and you guys know I study them in detail, that they just need a little more of an intermediate to vertical pass game. And by vertical, I don't mean just dropping back and chucking it 60 yards, down the field. More of those kinds of routes, those route concepts and combinations. I kind of felt, particularly with a quarterback like Josh, and my guess is they made a conscious decision that, hey, we're going to play this particular way, but I think you need a little more in terms of attacking at the intermediate / vertical levels. And again, that also gets down to their receivers. I mean, the hope is Coleman develops in the offseason and comes back to be what they hope he can be. I think Shakir's a really nice player, but I think we know what he is. He's not necessarily that guy. So I think they need more, both conceptually and from their wide receiver position, ideally from guys that are there, because they did draft Coleman with the first pick in the second round, somewhere right around there.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting too because they were number 2 in the league in scoring in the regular season. I mean, they
and it's
they were a
weird to say
factory.
that, but
They were a
yeah, but-
factory. Yeah, and I think that's where you got to think, well, okay, but can they do? And I think I don't want to get caught up too much in the fact that they lost this last game to the Chiefs and everything needs to be changed so that they can beat the Chiefs. We've already been down that road. You're trying to beat 31 other teams, not just one other
Correct.
team. And you got to get to the point where you have that swing. And I think really in the offseason, the philosophy's got to be just like it's always been with Buffalo. You got to get the most best players you can,
Yes.
and get the most out of them. And I think Buffalo has done an outstanding job of doing that. And as frustrating as it sounds to come up short to the same team in the same round of the playoffs, or within one round of the playoffs, it's frustrating to hear it. But that's basically they need to keep on.
Games. I mean, that's the thing. That's the killer. We'd be having a much easier conversation if they lost the game 35-10. It would be just as disappointing. But then we could say, oh my God, they really need to do this or else. But I mean, when you lose these games like that, I mean, which goes back to the game they lost, the 13-second game, which I know probably still is a tough nut to handle in Buffalo. But I mean, it's not like it's not like they're overmatched here, So it's very hard for me anyway, because I'm sitting here watching tape and I don't come away from the game going, oh my God, this Chiefs team is just so much better than the Bills. I don't think anybody would say that.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk Super Bowl 59 a little bit here. And I don't have to tell you, but the Philadelphia Eagles have the largest offensive line in football. They might be the biggest roster in football.
1,688 pounds are their 5 starting offensive
Yeah,
They might be the biggest football team in history.
Yeah, they're just big across the board.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think that the Eagles' level of talent and size can just allow them to bully the Chiefs up and down the field in Super Bowl 59?
Well, the way I'd answer that is this. I think the more important part of that question is, can they prevent Barkley from getting explosive runs? Because it's not so much that Barkley is going to grind out 2, 3, 4, 5 yards. Yes, he does that, obviously, against certain teams. But the Eagles are in many ways antithetical to the way people think about offense in this league. The idea that explosive plays come out of the pass game. The Eagles get explosive plays out of the run game. I mean, look, Brownie, think of it this way. You're the Commanders. You go 18 plays. Now, you wanted to score a touchdown, but you got 3 points. You converted 3rd downs to 4th downs. You're feeling like, hey, the pace and tempo of the game is working in our favor. And bam, the first play is a 65-yard Barkley touchdown. They get big plays in the run game. So to me, it's much more about stopping that. I mean, obviously, you want to stop them on 1st and 2nd down. I mean, I almost look at this as the Eagles will run the ball. And when you watch the Eagles, it almost feels inevitable that at some point Barkley's breaking one. So the question is, can they prevent that? That to me is the bigger question. Can they prevent Barkley from the 2 or 3, or depending on the game this year, he's had many of those 2 or 3, 4 runs that are just backbreakers because, he goes 40, 50, 60, 70 yards and it's ridiculous. I mean, sometimes it seems like it's a high school team that they're playing against. So that to me is the big question.
Yeah, that is, and I would agree with you. I can't wait to see the Philly running game against the Chiefs front. I want to see flip it around the other way. What about Kelsey, Mahomes, and Xavier Worthy against the Eagles front? Because
number one defense in football.
The Eagles front is massive as well.
Yeah, and there's some players on the Eagles front that are totally overlooked, like a Milton Williams is a terrific football player. The Eagles want to be in nickel. I mean, we used to talk about the Bills that way. They've become more dime at times, but, but for years we used to talk about the Bills played nickel 100% of their snaps, it seemed. That's the way the Eagles want to play. But as you guys know, the Chiefs play a lot of snaps out of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. And I think the Eagles will play nickel. So the question is, will the Chiefs try to run the ball? I mean, last week, the run game was a factor against the Bills. It's not like they ran for 180 yards, but wouldn't you guys agree it was a factor in the game? I mean,
sure.
They ran the ball with some success. They didn't necessarily run it with a ton of volume and a ton of yardage, but I'm curious to see how the Chiefs then play because the Eagles are going to play nickel. They're not very few snaps do they play out of base personnel. So, to me, that's another element of this game. And I'm really curious about the left side of the O-line for the Chiefs against this particular defense because I think the Eagles might be able to exploit that.
Greg, thanks as always for your help
Good
all
stuff.
season long, lending some insight and some X's and O's knowledge. We appreciate it, and we'll catch up with you at the NFL Combine.